oh my God, like I have flutters in my heart right now. I literally, my heart is fluttering. I'm so, so excited. So, I'm not gonna scream, but I could scream, but I'm so excited. So excited. I'm so excited. Okay. Um, okay. Okay. So let's think about where we are. Let's do a little revista, a little review of the story of Alan Wake and where we are. Okay, so once upon a time, there's this dude named Alan, and his last name was Wake, and he was married to this hot blonde chick whose name was Alice Wake. And he was a writer, and he was like really successful, and he wrote these like crime thriller books that made him like millions of dollars. And he lived in a penthouse with his wife, and his wife was an illustrator. No, she's a photographer. She was a photographer, and she did his like illustrations for his covers of his books. And his other, like his best friend was a dude named Barry. Barry was his editor and best friend. And he like wrote all these books. And then he wrote one book where he killed the main character. And everybody's like, oh, what's going to happen next? And that main character's name was Alex Casey, who's the detective. Alex Casey's the detective. And he killed that character off, and then he got a writer's block for like a couple years, I guess. And it was like really fucking with his mental health. He started like drinking a lot, and he started to become a little bit violent. And Alice was like, I don't know if I want to be in a relationship with someone who is like this. So they had some marital problems, and he was just like going nuts because he had writer's block. And so she's like, let's do a little private getaway, and let's go away to the mountains in Washington State, where there's this like really cool lake. We'll get a little lake house, stay in a cabin, and just enjoy the scenery and have a really good time. Bond, vacation by a chill lake, so chill. And then so like they get there, and she's like taking pictures, and she like, you know, they get to their little cabin. They stay on a cabin. They stay in a cabin that's on an island inside the lake. And you come to find that the lake is at Padro. Hi. They say the okay, so the cabin is on an island inside the lake, and the lake is actually made from an old volcano. So it's like a volcano that like it exploded and then it filled with water. And then there was a little island. So they're staying on the okay? And then so they're there the first night, and Alice, like, she, you know, she does a little strip tease kind of thing, and she's like, I got a surprise for you. And he's like, and she's like, it's not me, surprise, it's actually in the other room. And so he goes into the other room, and he's like, oh my God, it's a brand new typewriter. And then he gets really unreasonably mad. And then he starts yelling at Alice, like, I can't believe you did this. Marker, 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 marker. And just like that. And then Alice is like, hold on, I'm just letting you know. Like, listen, there's a doctor here. He's a psychiatrist, and he works with artists who struggle with their mental health. And he's like, are you calling me crazy? And she's like, no, I just think that it would be good for you to like see him and talk to him, and like maybe you could get over your writer's block and then feel better about yourself. And he's like, no. And then he storms out and he shoulder checks her on the way out, and I'm like, that's a little much. At this point is when I started to hate him. This is the point where I was like, I don't like this main character very much. He sounds like an abusive piece of shit. So he like storms off, and he's like, and he like crosses the bridge. He's like, I'm not gonna be on this island. But then the lights go out. No, that happened before. Just skip that. It's not super important. So anyway, he's like, you know, storming off, and then the lights do go out. The lights go out. And then he hears Alice scream, and she's like, no, Alan, no! And then she like, there's a big splash. He runs back, and he sees her face in the water, and she's just like, and the water is like sucking her down. Not like that. The water is like, and then she's gone, okay? And he like is like, oh no. And then all of a sudden you're driving in a car. You're driving in a car. Like, who knows what just happened? You're driving in a car. And we're following Alan at this point. And then Alan straight up fucking hits a dude with his car. He hits a dude with his car. He might have been like driving drunk or under the influence or something like that. And then when he gets out of the car, the person that he hit disappeared, okay? Disappeared, just straight up vanished. And he's like, what the fuck? And then the guy like reappears out of the woods, and he's like all shadowy and stuff, and he's like talking like it sounds like that. And then like he's like, oh my god, and the guy's like saying crazy things, and he starts attacking him, and you gotta like run, and if you gotta like run, and then get into the light, because it turns out that the guy is now made of shadow, and it's dangerous shadow. So then this guy like comes out, and he's like screaming all these mean things at you. He's like, you were never a good writer. You've only ever like written cheap thrills, and you'll never make it as an artist, and you're never gonna write again. And it was like all of Alan Wake's like insecurities being like screamed at him. And then this voice comes from the sky, and it's like, Alan. What does he say?
Deep in the shadow of darkness, in the mirror of light.
And he's like, basically like reciting a poem. And he's like, stay in the light, go to the lighthouse. And so Alan Wake runs away, and he's running away from this shadow who has an axe. The axe man in the shadow, but you can't hit him. But he's an axe man in the shadow. And so he's like running away from the guy in the mirror of light.
In the mirror of light, balance becomes a stranger. And in your fantasies, he rides a storm on your peace.
And anyway, so like the sky, like the moon is talking to you. It kind of feels like it's the moon is talking to you. Anyway, like you run to the lighthouse. And then in the lighthouse, there's another dude. He's like a normal dude. And Alan's like, oh my God, I had to run away from the dude. And then he's like, yeah, there's a dude outside, but still you gotta stay in the light. And then that guy goes outside, I think. And then he gets killed. He gets like axed in the face. Okay. And then you wake up. So then now you're starting to think like, is there like a little bit of psychosis happening right now? Because like this is like jumping around. And I feel like Alan might have lost his mind. And so we keep like jumping around in time. And then like there's all these periods of time where like it's dark outside and these shadow people attack you. And you have to like find a flashlight and you have to like shine light on them, and they go and then they can be shot, and then you can shoot them with a revolver or whatever weapon that you have, okay? So that becomes the thing. Is like sometimes you never know when it's gonna happen. It gets dark, and then shadow people come out and they attack you, and you have to shine a light on them to make them so that you can shoot them, because you can't shoot them when they're in shadows, but then you can chase the shadows away with the light thing. But the batteries don't last very long, which is the most unrealistic thing in this universe, okay? The batteries last for like 2 seconds. So you have to keep finding batteries and whatnot. So anyway, you're going through this thing, and it turns out that, actually, oh my gosh, thank you so much for the subby 3 months at tier 1. Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying the recap. So come to find, like, you keep like jumping around, and come to find, like, listen, you go through all these things, and you're like, Alan Wake is a piece of shit. This dude sucks. He like majorly sucks. I don't like anything about him. He just sucks. He's a little emotionally abusive, maybe neglectful towards his wife. Like, people are like, she drowned, or maybe she ran away, maybe she divorced him, and you're like, he sucks. And then you find out, spoiler alert, okay, if you haven't played the game, then you find out that he did have a psychotic break. Yes. Because his wife drowned while they were on vacation, and he lost his mind out of grief. And so he's like in this cabin, basically trying to rewrite reality on his little typewriter, trying to rewrite reality to make it like in his own brain, like this didn't happen, it didn't happen this way, to like try to save his wife. But behold, the the lake is magical. So the lake makes it so that when you like make art around it, the lake will like make that art happen in real life. So he's like trying to rewrite reality, go like escapism into his own little universe where his wife didn't die. And then the lake is like, bet, let's make it happen. And then, but the lake has desires of its own that are not good for humanity. Turns out there's a dark force, and the darkness wants to use Alan to rewrite reality to bring darkness into the world. And that's what's making all the people become shadow people. Dun, dun, dun. And so he's like, oh no, what do I do? Because the lake is trying to like make him write things into reality that brings the shadows into the reality. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I got to rescue my wife. But the lake is like, no, you're going to make it so that the shadows take over the world. And he's like, I don't think so. So let me figure out how to do this. And then in the end, what he fucking does is he writes his wife out of the story, and then he fucking jumps in the lake himself, and he's like, I sacrificed myself. And then at the end, we see Alice crawling out of the lake by herself. Okay, so that's Alan Wake 1. That's the story of Alan Wake 1. And basically what happens is that he's at the bottom of the lake, and he's like trapped in a writer's room, and the lake is trying to use him to rewrite reality and let the darkness out to take over the world. And he's fighting it. He's like fighting it. He's like, I'm not gonna let you do it. And the lake is like, I'm gonna warp this story, and I'm gonna make you forget what you wrote so that you write what I want you to write. And he's like, I'm trying not to let that happen. And that's the story of Alan Wake 2, and the story of Control. Alan is basically sitting at the bottom of the lake writing stories for a long, long time. Like for 10 years. No, more than 10 years, because 2008 is when the first game came out, right? When did the first game come out? I think it was 2008. So like a long, long time. A long, long time. He's like at the bottom of the lake trying to write stories to get himself out of the lake, rewrite reality to get himself out of the lake, and it's just like not working until Alan Wake 2. But we'll get there. So basically he just like wrote a bunch of stuff while he was down there. 2010, that's right, 2010. 2010 is when the first one came out, and so he's like down at the bottom of the lake for like over 10 years. Okay. And he's like writing. And at some point, he's meeting up with Thomas Zane. Thomas Zane turns out to have been that voice from the sky who talked to him, was like deep in the shadow of something. Thomas Zane was a poet who lived by the lake back in like the 70s. He like relocated there from Finland, or was it Sweden? One of those northern countries. He relocated there with his girlfriend Barbara, and he was like the original artist that fucked with the dark powers in the lake by like writing poetry that came to reality, okay? He got sucked into the lake as well after his girlfriend got sucked into the lake. Actually, his girlfriend got sucked into the lake and then like repurposed into an evil person, and he killed her and he ripped out her heart, and it was a whole thing. But anyway, he was down there in the lake as well. And so they're like kind of interacting with each other, right? And some of the stuff that he wrote was like with Thomas Zane, but also it seems like Thomas Zane might actually like be him. There's like this whole like, is it him? Is Alan Wake him? Is Alan Wake a creation of Thomas Zane? Or is Thomas Zane a creation of Alan Wake? We don't know. But we do know that Barbara was an evil, she was a conduit of the darkness, and she was like the main villain of Alan Wake 1, and she was like finagling everything. Okay, so is Zane a poet or a filmmaker? We don't know. We don't know. Okay? Because he originally was a poet. But then in Alan Wake 2, all of a sudden, he's a fucking filmmaker. And he says, oh no, I was never a poet. That was just a character that I played in one of my films. A poet who also wore a diving suit. I don't know what the whole thing is with the diving suit, but you see him in a diving suit. Yeah, so anyway, he's like, Alan's down at the bottom of the lake, Zane's at the bottom of the lake. They're trying to write shit together, like trying to like write movie scripts. They're trying to write novels and whatnot. I'll get to your affirmation in just a second. So anyway, that's the whole thing. It's like he's creating stuff at the bottom of the lake, and the lake is like warping reality and changing reality around what he writes. And that's basically like the story of American Nightmare. Alan Wake's American Nightmare is basically like centered around, I think it was like a television script that he wrote or a movie script that he wrote. Scratch. We also need to talk about Scratch. So when he went down into the lake created like this evil copy of him. This evil doppelganger version of him that fucked off and like hunted down Alice and was harassing her in their apartment. And he was like doing all kinds of crazy shit. In American Nightmare, he actually like murders people and tortures people. He's really bad. But then we find in Alan Wake 2 that he is Alan Wake, but he's like possessed. It's Alan Wake when Alan is possessed by the darkness. It's complicated and weird. So that begs the question. The lake is able to make doppelgangers? Maybe. Alan Wake is Thomas Zane, is Mr. Scratch. They're all one person, probably. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, basically, anytime Alan writes something, it becomes like, it warps reality. It changes reality. And that's maybe probably how we got the game of Control. Okay, so before I explain that, let me see. You wanted an affirmation in the... Hold on. Affirmation. Affirmation in my dark, poetic Alan Wake voice. I don't know.
Block Rocker, you are the champion of light.
I don't know how I did it. It just came out. I don't know how I was doing it before. So anyway, we're not super sure what the whole thing is about the Federal Bureau of Control. Was it a creation of Alan Wake, or was it a government agency that existed before Alan ever wrote his things, and then it just got like kind of sucked into his stories? We don't know. But that brings us to, okay, so anyway, so the Federal Bureau of Control is a government agency that gets involved when it hears all the shenanigans that are going on at the lake. Like, they investigate paranormal stuff. Think like X-Files or SCP Foundation type of stuff. That's the Federal Bureau of Control. And we explore the Federal Bureau of Control. We discover it in the game called Control. And the protagonist that we follow in that game is Jesse Faden. Jesse Faden, who's like an orphan by mysterious circumstances, who has a brother named Dylan who was kidnapped and taken away by the Federal Bureau of Control. So she's been hunting them down for like 10 years or something. She finally figures out where they are. She goes to New York and she finds the building that they are located in. And she goes into the building and she finds out that the building is in full ass lockdown, okay? And then she finds this magical gun, and it makes her become the director of the agency. She was just trying to figure out where her brother was, and they made her the whole ass director, okay? It was like a Sword in the Stone type of situation where she picked up the gun, and then like she had to run through these trials, and she was like, I am the chosen one. And then she got the job, and then everybody was like, oh, you're the director. And she's like, I guess I'm the director. Anyway, we find her brother, and he's like taken over by the Hiss, which is like, in that story, kind of like the equivalent of the darkness from the lake, but it's red. But it does the same thing as the darkness does. It takes over people, makes them go crazy, and also gives them crazy powers too. And so they become very aggressive. It's like rabies, but like rabies that doesn't kill you. It's like rabies that gives you special powers. But you don't want to bite people, you just want to shoot them or kick them, or throw rockets at them or grenades, or fly and pick up, levitate things with your brain and launch them through telekinesis. So that's the hiss. And it chants, it makes you chant, baby, baby, baby. Yeah, yes. Okay, so then we find out in one of the DLCs to that game that Alan Wake is involved somehow with the Federal Bureau of Control. Did he write them into existence? Or did they exist before and he just... But let's see. Okay, fast forward. Okay, that was like Jesse's story. Fast forward. In Alan Wake 2... the lake is up to its shenanigans again, and people start going missing. People start getting taken, and the Federal Bureau of Control, the FBC, was monitoring the lake and stuff. And they found, paranormal stuff is going on again. We better send some people out to investigate. And they also set up a full ass lab to investigate and study the darkness. And maybe do some creepy experimental stuff that went wrong. And that may be the origin of all of this shenanigans. But anyway, so in that game, we play as an FBI agent who's sent out to investigate a murder of a naked dude, who's been ritually killed, it looks like, by some kind of a cult. And through that game, we end up actually releasing Alan Wake from the lake. He comes out and he's like, boom, I'm here. And but he's very, very confused about what has happened. And he doesn't know what's happened. And then we were trying to figure out what happened and how we get him in the lake. And then also, at the same time, Mr. Scratch is going around fucking shit up. And it also turns out we actually meet Alex Casey, who was the detective in Alan Wake's books, okay? That was the name of the detective in Alan Wake's books. Turns out there's a real life detective named Alex Casey who looks suspiciously like the director of Remedy Studios, Sam Lake, but never mind that. Anyway, so Alex Casey is another FBI agent who's out here investigating all the shenanigans with Saga. Saga is her name? Yeah, Saga Anderson. Okay. And you're investigating the murders, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a cult that's ritually slaughtering people. We got to figure out who they are, and who the members are, and why they're doing this. And turns out that the cult is actually people. Spoiler alert for Alan Wake 2. The cult of the tree is actually people who are they're killing the shadow people. They're patrolling the woods at night and killing the shadow people that come out of the lake. So they're good guys. So in the end, in the end, Alan is out of the lake, right? So now he wants to figure out where the fuck his wife is, because that was the whole point of all of this. Try to figure out where she is. And she put together this videography project that was called The Dark Place. And it was tons of pictures of Mr. Scratch harassing her, but also pictures of what the world looks like inside the lake, which is the dark place. So she's pictures of shadow people and everything. And then in the end, it seems like she committed suicide. So all of that for nothing. Or did she? It actually kind of looks like she jumped back into the lake to try to save Alan. So he jumped into the lake to save her, and now she's jumping in the lake to save him. And it's just guys, just stay out of the lake. Leave it alone. Did I miss anything? Okay, I think that's those are the broad strokes, okay? So you understand, the things that we need to know is that Alan is beep bop boop writing at the bottom of the lake. And whatever he writes changes reality. Okay. I think that's everything. Thank you for listening. No Dr. Darling recap? Oh, shit. My husband. I forgot about my husband. Okay. The head scientist who's in charge of directing projects at the FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control, his name is Dr. Darling, and he is a darling, and he's ripped. During the story of Control, he figured out that the way to combat the Hiss, who was like the bad guy of Control, the Hiss is like basically a resonance, like a frequency that impacts matter. And he's like, we're gonna play a different resonance to battle the Hiss called Hedron. And it comes from this like being that's like a polyhedron, difficult to like understand, difficult to look at. And it emits this frequency called Hedron resonance. And when you expose things or people to Hedron resonance, it makes you immune to the Hiss. And so he fully exposes himself. He just like lets himself get a full frontal of Hedron resonance. And then like he kind of disappears. We don't know what happened to him. He just got like fully blasted with Hedron resonance, and he was like ripping off his clothes, which nobody's complaining about. And yes, this is still the Alan Wake recap, but this is part of like this is the part we're going back and talking about the Control universe, or we're talking about the FBC. The FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control. They're the ones who like investigated the lake. The head scientist of the FBC, Dr. Darling, he kind of disappeared from this dimension. Okay? And we didn't know where he went. Okay? We didn't know where he went. But when we played the second Alan Wake 2, and we played our second time through after the extra content came out. What do you call that? Is it DLC? That's not DLC. Whatever the extra content is, the after game content. It turns out that this man, he left the reality, regular world dimension, and he ended New Game Plus. There we go. In New Game Plus, we found out that the Hedron resonance carried him into the dark place. So now he's like in the dark place as well. He's in the dark place in the TV. Because we're like skedaddling around like this hotel in the dark place, and we see him on the TV. And he's like created this like radio frequency thingamajig that allows him to like speak to us. Okay? So we're like, oh my gosh, that's my husband. And then, so we see there's a couple of little cutscenes with him in the TV, and he's talking to us from the TV, okay? And then he meets up with, guess who? Thomas Zane. Thomas Zane, like, bombs one of the little TV things that Dr. Darling is in. And then he's like, you should come and you should write with me, or you should come and help me like create art that's like scientifically sound. Come with me and we'll do it together. And Dr. Darling is like, oh, okay. You kind of sound like me. And it's like, you're right. He does sound like you. And then you think, is Dr. Darling also Alan Wake, who is also Thomas Zane? Because they're all voiced by the same motherfucker. So we don't know. So anyway, Dr. Darling is now in the lake, which is kind of shitty that Hedron transferred him there. Like, I thought that Hedron was a good guy, but now that I'm explaining this to you, if Hedron is a good guy, why did Hedron put Dr. Darling inside the dark place? Maybe she's thinking Dr. Darling can help Alan get out. I don't know. So wait, that's the big question. Did I miss anybody else? A good guy and a wild card. Yeah. There's so much, but I'm trying to keep it simple. So simple. Oh, Gods of Asgard. Okay. So there's other artists who are like around the lake. And one of the artists is this like pair of brothers who made a band called Old Gods of Asgard. And they make sort of like power metal music. And when you read the lore, when you read all the stuff, you find out that they also had an encounter with the darkness of the lake when they had like this kind of like concert in their field, because they like have a farm. They're like having this concert and they're jamming out and stuff, and then like there's this like earthquake, and I don't remember like exactly what all happened with them. They stopped playing and the earthquake stopped, but they had like an encounter with the darkness as well, so they know some stuff. By the time Alan Wake happens, they're like old people now, like super old people. But they play a key role in getting Alan out of the lake. Because in order to like get him out, they had to like make art. Because like the lake funnels itself through art. So they wrote this banger. And that's how they got Alan out. And their music is so good and I'm addicted to it and I love it so much. And that's what we're listening to right now. They died a lot but kept coming back. What do you mean they died? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Odin has this he has this paper, this like paper that we like his journal where he's like I was alive during Viking times and then I was alive during blah 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 times and I keep coming back. That's right. Oh, and it turns out that the protagonist of Alan Wake 2, the FBI agent, Saga Anderson, she is actually related to the Anderson brothers, the ones who made the song that got Alan out of the lake. Yeah, she's like she's like their granddaughter / great niece. And there's kind of like this drama with her mom, Freya, over her dad. But who was her dad? We don't know, but we have theories. Totally forgot to talk about Quantum Break. Okay, so back up. Long before Alan Wake and the FBC. No. Alan Wake was before Quantum Break. Okay, so there's this other game in the Remedy universe called Quantum Break, where there's time manipulation. The hot guy in Alan Wake 2, who is the sheriff of Bright Falls, the guy with the beard, he's the protagonist in that other game, and he like gets involved with this organization that has this technology that allows you to manipulate time, and it causes all kinds of problems. And the main like CEO of that company, I don't remember what his name is. He was played originally by Derek. Oh gosh, what is his name? what's his name? He was in Riddick. Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, that guy, but then also Lance Reddick. Yeah, Lance Reddick was in it. Yeah. And they got him replaced by another guy who looks really similar to him and has a very similarly deep voice. I know. It would have been so cool that if Lance would have been able to return for Alan Wake 2. He would have. You know he would have too. So anyway, he was like, he played the CEO of this company. And then he reappears in Alan Wake 2 as Mr. Door, who's a guy who's like a talk show host in the dark place who interviews Alan and kind of fucks with him. And he knows some things. And not to like bring race into it, but he's like the only other black character. And Saga is like, she's mixed. Her mom was white. And Mr. Door is black. And we read in the lore that the reason why Freya left the Anderson farm was because she got in a dispute with her dad, Thor, who did something to her husband or boyfriend or baby daddy or whatever. We don't really know many details. But they did something. It sounded like they banished him somehow. It had something to do with the lake, probably. And so what I'm thinking is that Thor and Odin did something that sent Warlin into the dark place. And that's why Freya was pissed and left. Seems like it. Maybe. Possibly. I don't know. And yeah, she was like, nuh-uh, and left. Exactly. Took her baby too. Okay, that's all. That's all you need to know. There's so many other details, but like that'll cover it. I think that all of that will make the DLC make sense, because I think the DLC is like basically episodes of the TV show that Alan wrote episodes for, called Night Springs. Night Springs is like the Twilight Zone. It's like the Twilight Zone, but in the Alan Wake universe. And Alan wrote episodes for that TV show. And I believe that what we're going to play is basically how him writing those episodes changed reality.